It's been a story of ups and downs for Disney over the last 4 years, and it would be fair to say that the general perception of the brand in 2024, despite obviously making loads of money every year, isn't that great. Between theme park controversies, diminishing returns on Marvel and Star Wars for anything that doesn't have a great big nostalgia flag on it, and frustrations at the rising price of Disney+, it would be fair to say that current CEO Bob Iger has had a rough-ish time since returning from retirement to replace Bob Chapek in the Mouse House's top job. And things could be about to get weirder, as Electronic Arts head Andrew Wilson is being earmarked to take the reins once Iger steps down in 2026. I am thinking about all of that gamer baggage right now. I'm Ewan, this is What Culture, and with me today to discuss the future of Disney is your fave and mine, Gareth Morgan.
Too kind. Very, very kind. So yeah, at least we've got one favourite in this video, because I think the person we're about to talk about may not be everyone's go-to favourite for taking on this kind of role, because yeah, it's been an interesting time as head of EA over the last couple of years. As anybody who's been a big fan of the FIFA franchise and other kind of EA properties would know, it's I wouldn't say super concerning. Like right now, we don't fully know what's going to happen, but it is one of those appointments, if it does happen, that makes you just think, okay.
Yes, the bar is already kind of like quite low at the minute, I would say. This would make it, this would put an even lower bar, which is saying something given the kind of, despite, highlights like obviously, Pixar's movies are still doing great at the box office, and that is a positive that Iger managed to reverse out of Chapek's decision to put everything on Disney Plus in the wake of the pandemic and stuff. But overall, I feel like the mood around Disney at the minute isn't as positive as it was, 5 years ago, which is a long time. It doesn't feel like a long time, but it is quite a long time. And yeah, we should get into it. So this is coming from the Wall Street Journal. They're reporting that Wilson and many other candidates are currently being considered to replace Iger when he steps down in 2026. Quote, Disney is exploring fresh candidates in its search for a successor to Bob Iger, including some from outside its castle walls, as the board and its newly named chairman move to bring order to a closely watched succession process. Now, the report only mentions Wilson as one of the big kind of front runners here, and like you said, Gareth, before, he's kind of got a controversial reputation in the gaming industry. For those of you in the audience who aren't gamers or who have not been keeping up with any gaming malarkey in the last 5 or 10 years, you may remember that back in the early 2010s, EA was voted as like the most hated company in America. That, to be fair to Wilson, that was before his reign, but certainly he has not been free of controversy since taking the reins at EA. You mentioned FIFA there, Gareth. FIFA Ultimate Team is the company's biggest earner. It makes, oh my god, squadillions of dollars every single year. And there's obviously been embroiled in controversy because, as a product, these games cater towards children, and the nature of FIFA Ultimate Team packs, these little kind of like, things that you can put into your own team that you then play with online. That it's basically like a form. It's been criticized as a form of gambling because you don't know what you're going to get, and the game heavily encourages you to invest in these microtransactions. If you log on to FC 25, you will get an advert before you get the main menu, which is a practice that has been adopted, across the board, across many different games now. If you log into Call of Duty these days, you'll get a big advert to buy the new Battle Pass. It's a very aggressive strategy, which, is made all the more icky by the fact that football, it caters to people of every demographic, but, kids are heavily invested in this stuff, and by far the biggest drivers of what I would say is the income that is coming from FIFA. So Wilson, in that regard, he's really presided over that increase in focus on FUT, which, it brings a whole lot of baggage if he is going to Disney, given, Disney as a corporation has not been known to make the most ethical decisions in its time.
No, and like you're saying, it just makes you think and worry somewhat that are we going to head down a route where that sort of strategy, I don't know how it would be implemented in the movie sphere or television sphere within Disney, whether it's a case of just, for me, it always just feels like, especially with stuff like Ultimate Team, like something I do actually play quite a lot of, it just feels like it's never enough. There's always something, there's always a way for them to just extract a little bit more money out of the consumer. And I feel like if that's the direction they go in now with Disney properties, is it going to be a case of films are just set up to make you kind of linger on for the next one and the next one? Like, we're already somewhat in that cycle now with Disney, where it's like you don't really just get a tight, this is a story, beginning, middle, end, it's done, satisfied, really creative, really bold. You don't really get that. You get, every single movie that you watch feels like the first act of a larger story to a certain degree, if it's a new property. And that's, I don't know, it's a little bit deflating, because you never feel fully satisfied, and that's kind of what they want. It's like the McDonald's of the movie industry, isn't it? Like, you finish your meal and you're like, I'm not quite done, am I? I could still do with a McFlurry, I could still do with a bit extra. And I feel like if we do head down that route now more and more, like I said, we have already kind of began, if feel like we're gonna just exacerbate this issue somewhat by bringing in somebody who is very much a fan of that sort of strategy. Clearly, if you're looking at Ultimate Team and other properties, I don't think it's a great thing for the consumer in terms of just getting fulfilled from the stuff that we're watching in cinemas. Like, it's not, for me, it doesn't entice people to go back to a cinema, because I want to go back to the cinema straight away when I've watched a great story. Like, just personally, when I've watched something that's just lit my soul on fire, and if those characters and that story itself, that world has really captured my imagination, I will then want to go back. I know it's a crazy concept, I will want to do it. I'd be less inclined to do that if the story itself is just a bit meh, a bit bland, just paint by numbers, feels like it's been made by an algorithm and it's just unfinished, there's just an open end. I'm like, I just don't care that much. But that is a very clean, a very efficient way of creating product, movies and television nowadays, and I feel like that's something that these business-minded folks who will come into like your likes of Disney's and your EA, they look at it and go, right, what's the quickest way we can produce stuff that people are going to be half interested in and they want to come back for more, like that. I feel like that's what these business heads are going to maybe like push more for Disney. But I do understand that you need to bring these people in who are moneymakers, because at the end of the day, Disney is a business. Like that is important.
And, in Wilson's defense, he has, despite, the ethical quandaries that have arisen from his time at EA, you can't argue with the results. So on a pure financial level, if you're a Disney stakeholder, or you're potentially keen about the avenues that could be explored in terms of Disney looking at the gaming industry, obviously, over the last few years, they have been making more considered deals rather than the blank slate they gave to EA with Star Wars, for instance, which only yielded about, three big AAA games in that time, and by the point in time that the third one had released, we'd already, that deal had kind of expired. Obviously referring to, the 2015 Star Wars Battlefront and its sequel, which again was hugely controversial for all the loot boxes that went on going with there. But, maybe there's some positives to draw from that avenue. Maybe we'll see a more, heterogeneous approach to the overall makeup of Disney's investment portfolio, which is the worst thing that's ever come out of my mouth. But again, like, it's just one of those, we don't know how it's going to be until it actually happens, but just going off of the reputation that Wilson has accrued, in the gaming sphere recently, it doesn't bring the most amount of confidence. And certainly, we don't know how he would manage Disney. We don't know how he would look at Lucasfilm, for instance. We don't know how he'd look at Marvel. There are several really big things coming out for Lucasfilm and Marvel within the next 2 years that feel kind of make or break. You have Avengers Doomsday, and the other one that they're doing, Secret Wars. Yeah. So we have those two, which feel like a big, kind of like roll of the dice to see if we can get people back. Obviously Deadpool and Wolverine did great this year, but it's slightly different in terms of it pulling from the Fox movies and stuff. And then with Star Wars, over on What Culture Star Wars last week, we were discussing the reports about, Lucasfilm feeling like they don't have any like brand characters to fall back on to get people involved. We've got the Mandalorian and Grogu movie coming out. There's a lot of weird bets going on here that could shake out in different ways, which would maybe provide insight into whether a Wilson Disney would provide more continuity with what Iger has done or more change. But overall, it's just depressing business news 101. A guy who has succeeded making lots of money from doing unethical things, criticized being unethical things, getting to move into, potentially getting to move into the biggest job in the entertainment industry. So, it's certainly a time.
Yeah, it's one of those where we've said it a couple of times in the video. We do need to just wait and see how it shakes out, but all we can do when we see these kind of reports is just go off what's come before, and what's come before has been a bit disheartening. It has been doesn't feel like the direction has been for the consumer. It's more the direction has been to extract from the consumer, if that makes sense. Like, it's not something where you feel like Disney now is going to be creating stuff that's going to pull in people because it's incredible content and incredible work. It's not necessarily going to be that. I don't feel like that personally. I'm sat there looking at these decisions and I'm like, okay, we're gonna have more just stuff crammed down our throats just for the sake of stuff, and then once we finish with that stuff, there'll be more stuff, and I feel very just deflated about the whole thing whenever I see these kind of stories. So I'm hoping for the best. I am. I'm hoping that maybe he comes in and shakes things up a little bit, and then there could be new aura around Disney, a new energy around Disney, because for the longest time it felt like a somewhat safe pair of hands. I don't know what it was. You felt like you were going to get something relatively creative, and yeah, they had all the properties that you know and love, but they didn't necessarily rely on them to bring you into cinemas. They were pushing for new stories, whereas now I feel like we are just getting into safe and bland franchise territory, because that's the safe bet now, and that's where the money is. The only way we can change that, I think, as an audience, is maybe not going into the cinema to watch the same old stuff. I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon. We'll have to see how something like Moana 2 does at the box office. I've not necessarily kept an eye on that yet, but if
I'm expecting Moana 2 to make a ruckload of money.
Yeah.
I think in regards to the nostalgia flag being the big thing that's bringing, I genuinely think it's still up, touch and go for me. I think Deadpool and Wolverine, you had the love for Hugh Jackman's iteration of the character. You're following two big sequels there as well. So even though it is heavily mired in history, there are some exceptional circumstances.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see whether audiences buy into Robert Downey Jr. coming back as Doctor Doom, whether they see it as such an insane Hail Mary that they go, I have to check this out, or if they feel a little bit condescended to. I think that's an interesting question to throw out to everyone down in the comments below. What do you think of Disney's strategy at the minute? And do you think Andrew Wilson of Electronic Arts is the right man to steer the Mickey Steamboat going forward? Let us know down there. Drop the video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to What Culture for more tasty morsels of news, list content, and editorials to your inbox every single day. Either way, I've been Ewan, this has been Gareth, and we will catch you next time.
Bye-bye.